Hello, hello. This is Mona Duncan, and I'm here for this week's edition of Greet the Week. Jan is still on vacation. She will be back with us next Monday and have all sorts of good things to tell us, I'm sure. But today, it's me, and I thought we would just talk a little bit about, last week we talked about learning to be assertive, or looking at passive-aggressive and how those don't work long run. And so as we become more assertive, which is asking for change without demanding change, which is where we are able to express our legitimate, honest feelings, insights without undue anxiety. And it's learning to do that and be open and honest in our relationships. So before we, or as we're going, I wanted to just up what we talked about a little bit last week, is the fact that passive, it's that passive is wanting to get along, doing everything that you can to try to not roil the waters, to be a peacemaker. And in most faith teachings, there is being a peacemaker. But the thing of it is peacemaking doesn't necessarily mean that you always give in. Sometimes you have to roil the waters so that you can stir up the mud, and so that the things that are sunk in and that's really making it heavy needs to be scanned off and gotten rid of. So that passive really brings no resolve. But even a passive person will, have a crawl full and come off and being rather aggressive. But because it's not in keeping with the natural personality, it doesn't take long until the passive is right back into that passivity. And then the aggressive, is just kind of always being aggressive and letting out the opinions and so forth. But again, it doesn't bring resolve. But it's even more aggressive than it is on the general everyday today thing. And so the person in regret becomes rather passive. I'm so sorry, I'll never do it again, please forgive me. And but again, because it is not in keeping with the natural personality, the person goes right back into that aggressivity. And then there's the passive aggressive, kind of right in the middle, but that doesn't help either, because it's just another mask. And so as we begin to learn to be assertive, and that's where we consciously, deliberately, on purpose, view our life and where we're coming from and where we're going and what we really want to accomplish and how we really want our relationships to work together. So again, I've got a couple of things here for us to look at. Sharing the screen. I think it's that one. Let's see. No. Well, we'll get there eventually, but I want to go to something else. If you'll just bear with me for a minute, I'm still learning this. And okay, we'll just start there. Because here, although you can't see this just right here, it says hope is nowhere. Or hope is, okay. Well, I don't know what it is. But how do you read this right here? Have you ever seen this sign before? This is not original with me, so you may have seen it before. Where it says, the HOPEISNOWHERE. And it can look like hope is nowhere. It's all scrunched up together. But as we look at it, it can also look at hope is now here. And hope always is there. There's always a better way to handle things. There's always a more benevolent way of looking at something or looking at someone. And as we begin to deliberately, on purpose, consciously be aware of that, then we can work with the situation in being more assertive rather than passive-aggressive or passive-aggressive. So I want to talk today about carefronting, or leveling, where we can level with ourselves and also level with others. So I have it here that our natural response to conflict is either to just get even, And everything has consequences. Doesn't matter what it is. It always has a consequence. And then trying to get even, what happens all too often is that we're wanting, no one wants to be the underdog. And so at least if we can get even with, that makes us just as bad as the offender. It kind of evens all right, except it evens in a disevening way. And another way to work, to try to solve a problem is revenge. Just doing something to make you feel the way I feel. And I don't know that can ever happen because we're just too unique. We're too special. And sometimes we want someone else to feel the pain, the sorrow, the being degraded, the being humiliated that we felt. But again, that just revenge not only injures others, but it kind of puts us below them. And we're wanting to learn through being assertive, to take the high road, to make the conscious choice of not being offended, to make the conscious choice of not deliberately wanting to offend someone else, just as a way as a payback. Another natural response to difficulties in life is to hate. And I would encourage you to notice how often you might use the word hate. Again, it's being aware of. And it might be a strong dislike, but a strong dislike. Hate's a very, very hard word, very harsh word. And that hate harms you. Plus, it puts you being below your enemy because it boomerangs on us. Whether you call it the golden rule or karma or hocus pocus or whatever, what we give is what we get back. And so often we may want to say, yeah, but that's what they're giving, so I'm just giving them what they want. Well, not necessarily. But it still comes back to us, and if we don't like what we're getting back, then it's time to rethink. Time to rethink. Another way, natural way to handle conflict is just to ignore. Well, I'm just going to ignore this. But sometimes in that ignoring, it may give us this air of superiority. And again, it's pretty self-righteous. And it kind of gives you a one-upmanship. Now, I want to be real quick to say that there is a huge difference in ignoring something and in overlooking it. And to me, that's definitely a part of the assertiveness, is learning to overlook an indiscretion, learning to overlook a misstep. A friend of mine, picked up her grandchildren from school, or a client picked up the grandchildren from school, and the one little granddaughter, every time she saw her, she just had this black cloud over her head. And they would get in the car, and she'd pick up the younger grandchildren first, and they would be chatting and having fun, and then the older grandchild from the older ages would get in, just had this big cloud on them. She'd be interacting with her friends, and as soon as she got in the car, there was this cloud that followed her. And so the grandmother was not knowing what to do, and I encouraged her to just speak to the child and interact with her, and ask about her day and so forth, and then go on and interact with the children, with the other children, and of course include the older teen also. And so anyway, the next week she came in and she says, I don't know. She said, I don't think ignoring her is doing any good. And I said, no, that's too harsh. There's a major difference in ignoring someone and in overlooking it. We can overlook if someone's in a snit. Sometimes we want to try to get them out of it, to wish away that black cloud. But they have to do it for themselves, because we are free will agents. And we won't do any of that stuff until we decide to do it ourselves. And sometimes that ignoring just kind of solidifies it there, and maybe even brings some rain clouds down. So if we just choose to ignore it, that it's not my job to get you out of that snit, and you continue to interact with the other children that's with you or the other co-workers, but not ignoring that person, occasionally bringing them in. But well, what did you think about that? Well, do you remember reading that story when you were a child? Something to help to engage. And it's having that assertive, that open embracing of individuals. So another way that we sometimes handle a natural response of handling difficult situations is the poor little pity me. And we may want the offender especially to pity us, but we really don't. You know, it's kind of pitiful. Nobody wants to be seen as being pitiful. But to show pity really is a victimhood. I'm the victim here. And no, don't cope, overcome. Don't be the victim. It sets you up to be used. It sets you up to be used again and again. It just sets you up. So inside of us, we have a victim and we also have a victor. So get in touch with that victor so that how you can, in that difficulty, you can take the high road. You can choose to not be offended. Now, that's not saying that it's not offensive. It's just that you are choosing to not let that be offensive because just maybe there's a little smidgen of truth in it. I just don't want to hear it right now. And as we think about it and self-evaluate it and come to that conclusion ourselves that maybe I am a little stubborn, then we have something we can work with rather than trying to convince someone else that we're not stubborn when they're not about to change their mind about it. Then there's kind of a supernatural response, and that is to forgive. But it takes a really, well, it's not an easy thing to do, but it's not that difficult either. As with a lot of things in life, we make them much more difficult than they need to be. Because to forgive, it sets you free. You know, this guy was telling me one time, he said, you know, for years I was locked up, and I mean, he was literally locked up. I work with pre-release prisoners with they're still federal prisoners, but they're in transitional housing to be out on their own. And he said, I realized that I was the one that was keeping me locked up. I was literally locked up, but I was even more locked up, and that I had the key to it. And eventually he learned to, because it sets you free, even if you remain in the situation, in the workforce, in the difficult relationship. It sets you free to choose to forgive and to choose to see in that other person a person that you can hold in high regard. Maybe not that one particular facet. It may be extremely irritating, but overall, there is something to. Forgiveness is rare. It is bold. It's difficult. It's costly. It's kind of supernatural, and it's substitutional in that we choose to see something or to look at something in a way that is good for the whole. It releases the offender. You know, back to my little story about the teenager that was had the little black cloud on it. As we choose to forgive them for having that little black cloud on their head and enjoying life otherwise, but not enjoying it with family, then it sets us up to give freedom, to just give freedom to the one that's being so difficult, to give them the freedom to join in, to be a part of. So we'll go on down here and look at what does confronting look like. I had written on this one that I scanned in. I don't know where my original is, but maybe you can see through what we're talking about. Components of confronting. I call it confronting rather than confronting because many times we confront people and it just becomes more of a difficulty than anything. And so to me, confronting is I care enough about me. I care enough about you, whether it's one you or several yous, and I care enough about the situation as a whole that I will confront it, that I will bring up the process. Confronting is done in a caring manner. It's done gently, it's done constructively, it's done clearly. Know what your objective is, know what you're talking about. That many times we address something and we bring everything up. You always this, you never that. But in confronting, only look at the one particular issue that you're focusing on at that particular time. Confronting is working toward having a relationship that is honest and full of integrity. It's being upfront, it's leveling, I may not understand where you're coming from, but I want to hear it. I want you to know where I'm coming from. I want you to confronting, a part of being assertive, is inviting change without demanding it. But more importantly, it sets up the atmosphere for change to take place. Such as someone that is shy, and maybe they want to. Okay, let's go back with the passive person that's shy and is reticent about ever speaking up, and they learn to become assertive and they begin to speak up. You know, we don't want to come at them with, well, did you finally find your tongue? Did the cat, we thought the cat had your tongue, or you make something out of it. Or even on the aggressive side, the person that's always spouting off, and they begin to tone down. They may come across as the mouse that roared. And what? I'm ready for it. Come on, I can take that. But with confronting or being, we invite change without demanding it. We set up a stage where the person can change, where they can speak up and be truthful, or they can tone down and be truthful. And we can handle that. And we can be okay with it, because we can transcend what's happening right there before our eyes to see what's happening internally, what is happening in the relationship as a whole, what's happening in the workforce as a whole. That there's a beginning to understand each other and to work together. Confronting always is having the other person's best interest. Now, sure, it's keeping your best interest there also, but it's having the other person's best interest at heart. It kind of is holding a mirror up for you to see you, because how the other person responds to what you're saying, what you're doing, to your demeanor, will be a mirror for you to see, as if you're helping or hurting the situation, and always self-evaluate. Confronting gives love, support, understanding. But a big no-no in confronting or confronting or in leveling is to place blame. It's a big no-no to shame or to punish. It's a means of trying to rectify. So here are some steps. But before we get there, I want to go back and share something else here. I think I still have it on here. No, that's just where we were. Sorry about that. Thanks for your patience. Okay, I see it now. And you share, stop sharing. Okay, here we go. When there is, if I could draw a line through here, that would come straight down. I don't want to take that off the screen, but if the line could come straight down, that there's been some kind of a misconduct, whether it was legitimate or if it was from our eyes. And if we take it and we don't speak up, we don't say anything, then to the other person, it's giving consent. And sometimes we don't say anything until, we've had enough of this. Not setting those boundaries. We don't speak up, we don't say anything, we act as though it's okay. Not setting those boundaries leads to looking at, I'm giving you permission, or at least I'm in compliance with it, that it's okay. Now, whether that is a child that is disobeying, whether that is a coworker that is not following, it's just to we, with attitudes, give the impression that, you know, we're in compliance with, or it's okay, you have permission to. And then that sets us up to be subject to abuses. Now, it may grow to something violent, but it starts off initially being set up to being abused as to not being held in high regard, maybe being referred to in negative ways, or the third-party conversation is being snapped at, or, you know, whenever you're in a group with others, that someone will mention something about you in a snappy way that they didn't have the courage to, or maybe you didn't have the courage to speak up to the person at the time, or to confront and talk about it later. That leads to abuses, from the disregard to the violence. And then in the process, our emotions get more raw. They become angry, or there's more fear, there's more revenge, there's more difficulty there. And it leads to setting boundaries, yes, but they're inordinate. They're kind of out of bounds. It leads to holding that mask up. It leads to defenses, and to dishonesty, and maybe to thinking that hope is nowhere. That hope there's always hope. There's always ways to overcome. I'll share my screen one more time. Back to this. And let's look at some steps to healthy confrontation. Work out your anger, work out your frustration. Think of some ways that you may even would talk with the person about it. You know, kind of plan your conversation as to what you would say, so that you don't go in accusing. That, matter of fact, and even, you know, one of the things that I have on here is that you initiate the contact. Maybe to do it later. There's something I need to talk with you about. There's something that's been bothering me, whether it was something I said, something you said, whatever. Talk with the person, and it, you know, I need some clarification. So, and then set a time, and set a time where you could be alone, just to talk with them one-on-one. Meet in private. Always begin with an affirmation that I appreciate your being willing to talk with me. I appreciate your coming here. You want to speak words of encouragement, and then obtain their permission. Obtain their permission. And if they are not in a position to, if the wound is too deep, if whatever, they're just not in a position to talk about it, then accept that. And we'll maybe another time that we could get together, because I really would like to talk with you. Point number 4, communicate the issue from your point of view only. Not you this, you that, but this is what I feel when you, because this is the way I saw it. This is the way I felt. This is what I was sensing. This is what, you know, from your point of view. And seek clarification and understanding. And then also let the other person express their rebuttals, their information from where they're coming from, to be open, and let them be open and honest with you. Number 6 is to ask for and receive forgiveness as necessary. Will you forgive me for misunderstanding? I choose to forgive you. Point number 7 is to compromise whenever it comes on opinions of misunderstanding. You don't ever want to compromise on a principle, on something that is a non-negotiable. But always, always affirm your love and your high regard for the individual. And work in a way that you can always retain your own personal high regard for you. And then at the bottom, I say, tell others of your reconciliation. Now, please do not misunderstand me. I'm talking there about, you just might, in casual mention, well, you know, well, that if anyone said anything, well, that's all been settled, and we're A-okay with that. And if anyone were to ever bring it, you know, we've settled it. Things are good. Not to give any details, not to ever break any confidences of yourself or of others. Well, thank you for tuning in and for watching this. I have enjoyed being with you. And I trust that this will help you. Any questions that you may have, any comments you'd like to make, I'd love to see them. So thanks a lot. God bless. Go in peace.